Deirdre, welcome to the show. I'm glad we got a chance to set up this podcast.
Me too. Thank you, Kevin.
Of course. So for those watching and listening, Deirdre Van Nest, she is the founder of Crazy Good Talks, where she helps financial professionals, entrepreneurs, craft their stories and make emotional connections with clients. And what we're going to discuss throughout this episode is how storytelling leads to impact, value, and expressing yourself in a compelling way when communicating with others. This video will give you an idea of how public speaking cultivates your story while connecting more with your audience. So definitely, if you can like, subscribe, and share this video, that'd be greatly appreciated. So Deirdre, to get things started off, can you share with everyone your background and how your experiences have shaped what you are doing today?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm probably the least likely person, Kevin, to be doing what I do. And in fact, if you had told me 25, probably 30 years ago, no, actually, if you even told me 20 years ago that I'd be doing this now, that I'd be teaching other people how to be great speakers and travel around speaking, I would have thought you were absolutely crazy. And that's because I had a really bad experience in my high school acting class in ninth grade. And I was kind of called out in front of the class and just felt humiliated. I don't know if that's ever happened to you where, a teacher says something and you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to speak up again because I don't want to go through that again type of situation. Well, that's what happened to me in my acting class. And unfortunately, instead of like it making me stronger and going, all right, well, maybe it was just a bad opinion or I was having a bad day or whatever, I just took it that I was really bad and that I shouldn't be speaking or acting or anything. And so I actually left the stage for 24 years. Like no speaking, no acting, no nothing.
That's a long time.
It's a long time. I don't love saying that. I don't love saying that. And it was so bad, Kevin. I was so committed to not, getting up in front of people again, that when I got my master's degree, my classmates came to me at the end of our first year and said, hey, do you want to run for class president next year? And my only qualifying question was, do I have to give a speech? And they're like, I think so, probably at graduation. And I was like, no, I'll do vice president, but I'm not doing president. I mean, that's how much I wanted to avoid speaking in front of other people.
So I mean, I could definitely understand how it could be nerve wracking, with being in that situation and not it hindering you from a mindset standpoint of not wanting to have that feeling again. So
Yes.
kind of walk me through your journey of what encouraged you to get back up and to decide and make that decision that, I want to get into writing. I want to get into public speaking. What was that decision process where you was like, this is something I want to do?
Yeah, well, it wasn't ever something I wanted to do at first. I have to be honest with you. It was kind of necessity. So I just want to tell you for your listeners, if you are like, oh my gosh, I don't want to public speak, I can't see myself doing it, I am terrified, you are in great company. You're not alone. So I want to just give you that encouragement. So what happened was in 2007, I got my certification as what's called a fearless living coach. It's a real thing. I didn't make it up. I know it sounds made up, but I didn't make it up. And what I was doing at the time was I was helping entrepreneurs recognize and get past the fears and excuses that were holding them back in their business and in their life. And I live in Minneapolis, and I started going to networking meetings and, meeting a lot of people, and they heard what I was doing. And I kept getting the same message over and over again. And if you're listening to this and you're a financial advisor or an entrepreneur, you've likely had this same message too, where people tell you, you should speak in front of groups because that's how you're really going to get your message out there, right? That's how you're going to get known. You can help more people. You should speak in front of groups. And I was like, oh, no, I'm quite happy doing this one-to-one thing. I have no desire to speak in front of groups. And when I would say that, I had an internal tension, and the irony was not lost on me that I was trying to help my clients get past their fears, but I wasn't willing to get past one of my biggest fears, which was stepping out in front of a group of people and speaking. And so I really pushed myself. I believe in walking my talk, and I really pushed myself, and I was like, all right, you know what? You've got to walk your talk. So this is something that you're going to have to tackle. So that was the first part of the decision, was I wanted to be for my clients who I was asking them to be. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So once I decided that, then I knew that I needed a process. I needed someone to help me put together my content so that it didn't stink. My biggest fear was hearing the words, "you stink," because that's pretty much the message I got in acting class. And so I was like, this has to be good. And I didn't have much money at the time. I was starting my business. So I started looking at books, and I started reading books. And I came across this book, and I think it was a God thing, because I don't know how I stumbled on it, but came across this book from a man who later became my mentor and is now a friend of mine. His name is Craig Valentine, and he wrote the book World Class Speaking. And that book kind of laid out a framework for how to structure your content in a way that was engaging. And I remember thinking, okay, well, if world-class speakers use this process, like, how bad can I be? I can't be that bad. And so I really hung my hat on a lot of prayer and that preparation and that process. And that's what started it. And then that was probably 2008-ish. I spoke anywhere I could for free for a couple of years and started getting really hooked on it. And I was like, oh, it kind of brought me back to that inner actress that I had inside of me all those years ago. And I started like nerding out and geeking out over every little detail. You know, the way you are with financial planning, Kevin, is how I am, right? With all the little nuances and details. And so I started working with a lot of financial advisors and entrepreneurs, and I was like, hey, I'm learning this thing. And if you do this, you actually will get a better response from your audience, and you can actually bring in clients this way. And I started teaching them what I was learning. And then pretty soon that turned into a big part of my business, was teaching financial professionals and entrepreneurs how to speak in order to bring in business, but also how to get paid to speak, and just how to speak so you make an emotional impact and a connection.
Yes, I think that public speaking, is one of the most things that people fear the most, and I think that getting out of your comfort zone, I got a chance to, hear one of your speeches, and you talked about you can either live a life of comfort or live a life of growth. And I think that when you are public speaking, you're taking that leap of faith of really trying to engage with your audience and create that emotional connection where they can relate to you. So it's definitely one thing on my list this year. My bucket list is to have my first, public speaking opportunity for free, because, I just want to get those reps in. And I think that what you're saying, you speaking for 2 years for free, I actually want to get your thoughts on that. When it comes to public speaking, for someone wanting to get started, would you say that it's best to speak for free to get the experience, to get the knowledge and the skill set? Okay. Yeah,
it's really the only way that's going to work, unless you are a celebrity. And I don't mean you have to be a celebrity like, worldwide celebrity, but unless you're like well known and well respected in your niche or your field, you're kind of like a known entity already in your own sphere. Getting paid to speak initially is unusual. I'm never going to say you can't do it, because I'm not going to ever limit someone, but it's unusual. What's more typical is that, and I apologize, I have this like crazy hair. There we go. Okay. What's more typical is that, like me, you would go out and you would speak for a period of time. And I can't say how long or short that is. It just kind of depends on you and the marketplace and your topic, but you're going to speak for a period of time for free. I kind of spoke anywhere they would have me, right? I spoke everywhere from, banking groups to, I think my most interesting one was, it was like a dog walkers and like a pooper scooper type of group, right? And like anything in between. So that's really where you kind of cut your teeth, right? Like you practice your material, the stakes aren't as high. So you start to gain your courage and your confidence. You find out what audiences like and what they don't like. And then that's the way that you start getting visibility. You start getting known in your town or in your niche. And then this weird thing happens. And I tell all my clients, I run a year-long speaking, storytelling, and content creation, like mentorship program. And I do have a lot of clients in there who are using it in their business, like you want to do, Kevin, but then also others who are transitioning from maybe a corporate job into paid speaking. And I'm like, just trust me. It just like one day it happens. Like you're out there and you get what I call the velocity of visibility, which is you're getting out there. And then all of a sudden people will be like, hey, Kevin, I think I saw you speak at that event. Oh, Kevin, I saw you speak at that event. Oh, Kevin, right? And you start getting this velocity of visibility. And then at some point, someone walks up to you and they're like, hey, could you come in and do this at my company? And by the way, how much do you charge? And that's usually the way it evolves.
Yes. I think that's probably one of my strategies that I'm going to do to get started, to speak wherever I can. And, I think the biggest thing about public speaking is, don't look at it from a standpoint of, what you can get out of it. What value can you bring to your audience? And I think long term, you are going to see the benefits of how it helps your brand. But starting off, don't even focus on the dollar sign. Just, focus on the mission and the purpose of why you're speaking. So I wanted to get your approach with storytelling. I think that you're very great at it. I've looked at some of your programs on your website with, the Crazy Good Talks blueprint. And I wanted to actually get your thoughts on how important is storytelling when it just comes to when you're working with a client. It could be public speaking or even content creation. Can you kind of explain the importance of that?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I just want to circle back to something you just said, because I think it's really, really important. And it was really beautiful when you said, it's really not about you and what you can get. It's kind of what you can bring to the table. And if you can keep that, today I just did a presentation this morning and I was really thinking about and it was virtual and it was recorded, so I can't see the people, but I'm really thinking about loving them and connecting with them and what can I give them. So the more you can stay in that mindset, the more fun it is, the more joy you'll have, you won't be as hard on yourself, right? And the farther you're going to go. So I just love what you said, because that really is the mindset you need to have, I think, with most things in life, but particularly public speaking, going for connection and not perfection, which is hard, but it's really important. So going back to your question then on storytelling. Okay, so human beings are hardwired to connect. Right? Like that's what we do. And so I want you to imagine this scenario, Kevin, for a moment. I want you to imagine yourself at 5 years old. Okay. And let's say you're in your room. Maybe you're talking with your mom or your dad, caregiver, about your day as you pull up the zipper on your feety pajamas. And as you've done each and every night, you go over to your bookshelf and you carefully select the perfect book. You hand the book over to your dad and you say, Daddy, tell me, what? What would you say to him?
Tell me a story.
No, you wouldn't say, Daddy, tell me a story. You'd say, Daddy, tell me a fact. Tell me a statistic. I don't really care what the three little pigs wore, what they said or how they felt.
Yep.
I just want to know the statistical probability of that wolf eating those pigs.
Yeah. Now
you would never say that, right? It's like ridiculous.
Yeah.
Completely ridiculous, because you knew at a young age, without anybody telling you, that your brain learned best through story. And so we are hardwired for story. And even though we might be a little older than 5, it doesn't mean as you mature, all of a sudden your brain is now wanting to learn in this very factual, linear manner. Our brain still retains information best when it's told in the context of story. And so that's one of the most important things for people to remember. And I think unfortunately, I think the academic system, probably the business world has kind of and we're seeing a shift now. The pendulum is changing, but it's kind of like try to like, what's the word, sanitize everything. So it's just the facts, right? And and the story stuff is fluffy. And it's like, no, that's the human emotion. Those are the things that we remember. And that's how we connect. And so making that emotional connection is so critical. And one of the most powerful ways is through story. And we've been doing it since the beginning of time.
Yes, I think you making an excellent point about, even when I think about my childhood, some of my best memories are, just stories that my mom or dad either told me, or even with college classes, when I took entrepreneurship classes, my instructor was very good at telling stories and kind of relating an entrepreneurial concept to a story. And I think that it allows you to be more engaging with your audience. You're able to create some relatable topics that people can also get a better understanding of. And I wanted to just get your mindset on how does storytelling really allow a person to build trust or to build empathy, for example, like in a financial professional world. Can you either like walk through like an example, or really how storytelling enhances that conversation from the very beginning to the end?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm going to take financial advisors as an example. However, if you're listening and you're an entrepreneur, you're a teacher, you're a leader, whatever you are, this will apply to you, but we'll just use this as an example. Okay. And financial professionals probably have one of the hardest jobs in terms of building trust, because unfortunately there's been bad actors over the years, right? And people have some mistrust in general for the industry, but they also, a lot of people are intimidated by financial principles and conversations. And there's a lot of shame around money and how they may have handled it or not handled it. So financial professionals kind of have this mountain of stuff they have to get over to build that trust, right? And if you think about it, Kevin, if you've had a conversation with somebody who has shared something with you that is appropriately vulnerable. I don't mean like inappropriately vulnerable. We've all been part of that. TMI, right? That's uncomfortable. But if someone has shared something appropriately vulnerable with you, what does that do to the trust level? Like, tell me how that's made you feel.
You just feel that you feel more trust. You feel that they are sharing something with you that they may have not shared with anyone else. So it's really building rapport with the conversation, where they may feel more opened up to share more information. They feel more open to explaining whatever they're thinking about at the time.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like if you're an advisor and you're sharing a story, and let's talk about, because there's a lot of confusion amongst most people, definitely in financial services, about the types of stories you should be telling, because everyone's out there saying tell stories. And then I go out and I see people telling stories and I'm like, oh my gosh, why are they telling that story? And it's because they don't know what story to tell, right? And so there's two types of sort of branding business development stories. So let's just stick to those, because I don't want to get too far off on a tangent. So the two types of kind of branding business development stories are what I call the why story. And the why story is why I do what I do and why I care about the people that I serve. Okay. The other story is called a desire story. A desire story is usually a before and after snapshot of a client who's gotten great results working with you. Now, the point of the why story is to build trust, connection, and likability, and do it in 3 minutes or less, because these stories should be 3 minutes or less. And then the point of the desire story is to kind of build a case and showcase how powerful your solutions are for people without sounding like you're going into sales or selling mode. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So in the instance of the why story, let's just take that for a moment, and let's take the typical kind of financial services model where I come into an office of a financial professional. Let's say it's you, Kevin. You might have been trained that you should never talk about yourself. You should only talk about the client. So you're going to start asking me a lot of questions. The problem is we might not have built the rapport for me to feel comfortable answering those questions. So like you're asking me to kind of show you my underbelly, right? And show you all my warts. And yet I don't feel this connection with you yet. And I don't maybe know much about you. And so there's going to be this reserve there. However, imagine if, I come into your office and you say something like, Deirdre, I'm so excited you're here today. I can't wait to hear about your goals and your dreams for the future. And we're going to talk all about that today. And along the way, you might ask me, questions about how I can help you. And I'll answer any question you have. But what I'd love to do, if you don't mind, is take the first 3 minutes of our time together and just share with you why I do what I do. Because I think that's probably the most important thing for you to know about me. And then I'd love to jump in and start diving into what's important to you. Would that be okay? And then they're going to say yes. And then you share your why story, why you care about this person sitting across from you, why you want to help them, right? And it's appropriately vulnerable. What do you think the reaction is going to be of that person?
They're going to be very receptive, to wanting to continue to talk, or just the connection is going to be there at the very beginning.
Yeah, and that's it. The connection is there, and they feel, they feel connected to you. They feel connected. They feel like you have showed them that you're human, and they've either related to your story in some way. They've either felt a similar emotion that you have felt in some way. So anything that you can do where you're forging this emotional connection is going to build trust. And it is one of the quickest, if not the quickest way to do that. I'll give you a couple of examples. So a client of mine, his name is Roger. He's been in the business 40 years. He's a top producer with his company, and he started sharing his why story about 8 months ago in his one-on-one meetings with clients. And the past, 39 and a half years, he hadn't been doing that. And he said, Deirdre, what's happened over the last 8 months is there hasn't been a single person who's walked into my office as a prospect and not walked out a client. So every person who's walked in as a prospect has walked out as a client. And I said, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Tell me, what do you think's going on? He said, I share my story because I recognize I'm asking them very personal questions. And I think it's only right that I share something and I make them comfortable so that they're wanting to share those answers. And also, a lot of times what's happening is I'll share my story and they're like, oh my gosh, that happened to my sister or my cousin, or that happened to me. And it just immediately puts them at ease. And so that's the power of storytelling, is it puts people at ease, it puts you on the same playing field, and it shows that you're human and you care about them beyond the numbers.
Yes, and I actually wanted to talk specifically with that. Why do you think, and it may be in other industries, but I think specifically with financial planning, it seems that often those introductory conversations seem more salesy, very transactional, where it's not really the other person, the advisor, really trying to learn more or ask questions or tell stories at the beginning of the conversation that can allow them to connect more and to build that trust. Why do you think that is, and how do advisors kind of overcome those challenges as far as not being so transactional, but being more of how can I help you? What made you want to invest the time to meet with me today? Which I know I took that from you.
Love it. Nice job. I love it. Great job.
That's one thing that I'm going to start implementing. But can you kind of talk on that, of things that they can do at the beginning of the conversation to, kind of not to not be so transactional and more of just trying to help?
I think it's a few things. I do think it's training. I think historically, and this is changing, I think historically the industry has focused on training in this way. Right. I think that's just been part of the training that's been built in for decades. And I think, the thinking is, this is all about the client. So you really don't want to talk about yourself at all, which I get it. it is all about the client, but the reason you're telling the story is not to put the spotlight on you. It's so that you can make the client more comfortable so that they're open enough to learn from you and take your advice, right? So it's still about the client, as long as you've chosen the right story and you've crafted it in a way that's compelling and interesting. It's still in service to the client. So I think part of it is just decades of training. I think the other thing is, and again, this is just theory. Okay. This is my theory. I think the other thing is, obviously, you know, as a financial professional, you're in a mostly commission-based business, right? So you make money when you sell something. And I think when you start a career in particular and you're trying to pay the rent and buy your groceries, and I've been there, right? Because I'm an entrepreneur. It is really hard not to focus on the transaction, right? I mean, it's hard. You really have to work on your mindset so that isn't the first way that you're thinking. Oh, what can I get? How can I make this happen? Versus, okay, how can I be of service to this person? And how can I create a safe space for them to figure out what's important to them? One of my mentors helped me, and I struggled with this in the beginning of my entrepreneurial career. I mean, I definitely struggled. I have been there. I know the struggle is real. But one of my mentors taught me something that was so profound, Kevin, in terms of changing my mindset on this. She said, whenever you're in let's just call it a sales conversation for a moment, okay? So I want to be like, you know, let's just call it that. Whenever you're in a sales conversation, and that's a conversation where you could sell something, right, to someone where they would buy it and you would receive money, you want to have the mindset that you're 100% committed, but also 100% unattached. Okay, so what does that mean? So committed and unattached. And here's what that mindset is. You are 100% committed to finding a solution that is going to help this person. And you're equally 100% unattached as to whether or not that solution involves you or not. When you can go into a quote unquote sales conversation with that mindset and with that in your heart, it really frees you up to actually be more human and to be less transactional. And it's something that does take, I mean, it's my go-to now, but that took quite a long time. It's something that I had to train myself over and over and over again. You know, before I had strategy session, I'd be like, okay, committed, not attached, committed, not attached, committed. You know what I mean? And I had to just like drill it into myself. And so I want to encourage your listeners, you know, the more that you can get into that space and you can just see people as human beings, not as the job they do, right? Not as their title, not as whatever you think their status is, not as a dollar sign, the easier it is to make those emotional connections. And actually, the more successful you're going to be.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think it's more of having a growth mindset, you know, instead of a fixed mindset of, excuse me, as far as, you know, fixed mindset, you're pretty much just stuck in one way of thinking. Whereas with a growth mindset, you're looking at all of the opportunities and the alternatives, and you're not just focused on one particular thing, whether it's making money, you know, growth mindset, you're more of what value can I bring in this conversation? How can I help this person and be best of service to them? So I totally agree where you're coming from. I would love for you to, if you are okay with it, as far as like sharing your story, because when I first heard it, you know, I thought it was so powerful when I heard it on the Financial Advisor Success podcast of Michael Kiss. And you were really just talking about, you know, how what we do in this line of work is very needed. And it kind of tied into your story and all of the things that you're doing with Crazy Good Talk. So I would love for you to share your story if you're comfortable with it, and just how you identified that this was going to be your purpose-driven story.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of my areas of specialty is the financial services sector. I do spend a lot of time here. And the reason why I've become obsessed over the years with helping financial professionals be really compelling, inspiring, emotionally engaging communicators is because of something that happened to me in my childhood. So when I was 10, it was May 24th, 1980. My mom and dad were getting all gussied up to go on a fancy date in Manhattan. I'm from New York originally. And my mom was behind the wheel driving the car into the city. And about 4 minutes into their ride, they pull up at a red light. And my mom at the time was transitioning from being a stay-at-home mom to wanting to get back into the workforce. I was 10, my sister was 5. And so she wanted to talk with my dad about the plan she had for her life on the car ride down. So as they were sitting at this red light, she actually turned off the radio and turned to my dad and said, I want to tell you what I want to do for the rest of my life. And then at that moment, when those words were out of her mouth, Kevin, the light turned green. So she pulled the car into the intersection, and it was a 4-lane highway. And they were immediately T-boned by another car running the red at 90 miles an hour.
Man.
Yeah. And that was it. She was killed. And I just think of the irony of her last words being, I want to talk with you about what I want to do for the rest of my life. And the rest of her life was like a second.
Man.
I know. It's one
so
of those things that haunts.
loss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. My dad was thrown from the vehicle and he landed on the other side of the 4-lane highway. He was so far actually from the accident scene that rescue workers didn't even know he was there until one of them, like they were packing up to go. And one of them was like, there's a pile of clothes over there on the other side of the highway. Like, what is that? And it was him. It was him lying there. But he was so like mangled up and didn't even look like, like the form of a person. And, fortunately though, he lived, he was in the hospital for a while. He was out of work for many months and he lived. But that experience obviously affected me in a lot of ways, right? A lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And if you're listening and if you've experienced something like that, you totally get what I'm saying. One of them was having life change in a snap made me realize how tenuous life is, right? It kind of stole my innocence that, before something really bad happens to you, you think bad things only happen to other people. And then life hits you and you're like, oh my gosh, no, this can happen to me. And so we were blessed, obviously it took an emotional toll on us, but we were also blessed that it didn't take a financial toll. Very fortunate that it didn't take a financial toll. And I don't know how people recover when that happens. And I don't want anyone to ever be in that situation, because most people, quite frankly, and I know this because when I got pregnant with my first child, one of the first things I did was drag my husband to a financial planner. We sat down and started the planning process. Wanted to make sure I had life insurance. Wanted to make sure we had the wills. And when I started talking with my friends at the time who were also pregnant, they looked at me like I had 10 heads. Like, why would you even think of that? And I was like, oh my gosh, not everybody thinks this way. And so it made me go, oh my gosh, people are really vulnerable, right? Like a lot of people are one tragedy away from total financial devastation. And so they need the financial services industry. They need good advisors who really care about them to come alongside of them, provide guidance and coaching and listening and solutions so that they don't have their life changed in a snap and be caught unawares. And so where I come into the equation is not for me, myself, to be a financial professional, because I don't think that's what God called me to do. God has called me to equip the industry behind the scenes, helping you become the most compelling communicator you can possibly be, because the more inspiring and compelling you can be, the more likely you can get your clients or your prospects who want to put off these decisions, want to put off these conversations for someday, you can get them to have those conversations today. So that's really my messaging and why I'm really obsessed with helping financial professionals talk to people in a way that moves the needle.
Yes, this is thank you so much for sharing the story. It's just so powerful and it really stands out to me. And I think, with working in the industry, I've seen it firsthand, conversations with people and they haven't really done any planning towards having a will, having trust, having life insurance. Even with my family, I had my grandfather on my dad's side. He passed away and he didn't have a will. Luckily, there was some assets put to the side, and my family was able to separate it. But the thing is when that happens, you are more prone to the courts taking some of those assets. Whereas when you have a will, when you have a trust, you have things put in place where you don't have to go through the probate process. So
Yes.
I really understand the importance of it, and it just really reiterated, encouraged me with hearing your story that the work that we do, it really helps a lot of people. And like you said, people are, one financial tragedy away. Just one thing can happen, and if you're not prepared, it's not going to be the best, situation. So I totally agree with that.
Yeah, and excuse me one second, my phone,
Yeah.
I don't know if you can hear it dinging. Let me just.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's no fun. That's no problem.
Yeah. So and
yeah.
here's the thing. Here's how stories kind of come into this equation.
Yeah.
If you are talking to a client, right,
Mm-hmm.
and you're just giving them the facts and figures of, let's say, investing in life insurance,
Yep.
they're going to drag their feet for quite a while, probably, unless, right, they have a triggering event to make that decision. Like if you're just like, well, here's the facts, or this age, this could happen to you, blah, 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 blah. It's not going to get very far, and you're going to be meeting a lot. However, if you tell a story that has to do with life insurance, you will likely move the needle in that meeting. And I've seen this happen over and over with advisors. I had one advisor who I did a storytelling workshop. That afternoon, she had met with a couple. She was meeting with a couple, and it was about life insurance. And she had just learned about telling stories, and she happened to create a story in the workshop about life insurance. She shared it, and she emailed her her manager and was like, "Oh my gosh, tell Deirdre that this couple who had been dragging their feet for months, after I told my story, looked at each other and said, 'All right, let's do it.'" And they move forward. And so that's the power of story, because it makes the emotional connection. You know that people don't make buying decisions on emotions. I mean, on logic, right? They make them on emotions. And then they back it up with logic. But most financial professionals, most people, when we're trying to like get someone like to see our point of view, we are giving them a lot of facts and figures.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that's the thing within our industry. You got to kind of get out of, we know how important whatever the product or service is, whether it's life insurance or will or trust, we know how it can change a person's life, but how can you make it relatable? How can you explain, like what I was saying within my family, proper things weren't put in place, and this is something that I'm trying to prevent for you. I think things like that, people, they feel, they feel encouraged, and you build that empathy and that trust where they want to open up more now because you share something maybe emotional to you that, you don't typically share with everybody. So I can see how storytelling really helps a lot. And I wanted to get your perspective on, as far as the core elements of storytelling, is it really just having a why, having a desire? What about even like having an analogy to whatever story that you're explaining, tying it to whatever concept that you're selling, whatever product or service? Are there any other core elements that you would say that leads to more success when it comes to a great storyteller, other than the why and the desire stories?
Well, so let me ask you, I want to make sure I understand the question. Are there any other types of stories, or are you asking like, what are the elements of a successful story?
Yeah. So what are the elements of a successful story is essentially, what makes a great, story where you've seen in your personal experiences where you really connected with someone?
Okay. So there's a few things. So the first, and this is one of the most challenging places for most people, is to make sure you identify the right story. So if you tell a story, so let me give you an example. Let's say I was talking to a group of CEOs in the tech industry. I'm doing a presentation. and I want to share why I want to help them be better communicators. If I shared the story that I just shared with you that's geared towards financial professionals, do you think they'd be scratching their heads going, why is she sharing that with me? I don't understand how that relates to me. Yeah, right? I mean, that story, as heartfelt as it is, as important as it is not relatable to a CEO in the tech industry. There is like no point in me sharing that story with them. And yet, when people here tell a story, they engage in what I call gratuitous vulnerability. That means they're vulnerable for the sake of being vulnerable. They don't understand that the vulnerability has to serve the listener. So it has to be directly and deeply related to the content and to the listener. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. So that's the first thing. You have to make sure, oh, is my ideal listener going to relate to this story? Is it going to matter to them? Is the story actually ultimately about them? So that's number one. So when we write, we have a service called Asset Creation where we actually write stories for advisors and entrepreneurs. And the first step in that service is we have a discovery session where we are, what I call it I call it chiseling out the David in the marble. It's like an archaeological dig. Like I know there's a David in that marble, right? Everyone's got gold and beauty in their life. So I'm just a little hit there, a little hit there, a little hit there. And the point is to pull out the story that's going to really appeal to that advisor's, that entrepreneur's ideal audience. So that's the first thing. Make sure you're telling the right story with the right point for the right audience. Then the next thing, and this is where a lot of people fall down and things can go off the rails, but this is so critical. You want to actually write the story out word for word. Does that mean you have to say it the same exactly word for word every time you tell it? No, that's not what I'm saying. You can, but I'm not saying you have to. But the reason why you're writing it out word for word is the process of writing actually helps you edit your thoughts. It's actually hard to know what you think if you don't write it down first. So writing it out, and then you have to do something really, really difficult, which in writing circles is called kill your darlings. And it means you have to get rid of the content that might be near and dear to your heart, but doesn't really matter to the story, you know? And you have to get rid of the things that don't fit in the story, because in a story for business, if you're talking with your friends, just do whatever you want. But if for business, in order to be compelling and captivating, you can only include what will move the audience forward. So every word, every sentence, every idea has to count. So one of the ways I like to describe it, Kevin, so I love analogies, by the way. So analogies are another great way to connect. Like I'm like an analogy junkie. So let me give you an analogy for this. Okay. Imagine you were going to Costa Rica. And actually I am going to Costa Rica soon. So let's just say I'm going, I'm excited. I'm going to Costa Rica, and Costa Rica's hot right now.
Yeah.
Okay. It's hot. All right. So, when you go on a trip, you get, you bring a suitcase. And the suitcase is the container for how much you can bring with you, right? Yep. You have a limited amount of space when you take a trip. So knowing that it's hot in Costa Rica and I have limited space, am I going to bring my winter coat with me to Costa Rica?
No.
No. Like that would be a waste of space, right? It's taking up room. And it's not allowing room for the clothes that I actually can use in Costa Rica. So I've got to take, even if I love my winter coat, I've got to take that out and leave it at home because it doesn't belong there. It's wasting space. So it's the same with your story, with the details that aren't really relevant, that are maybe cluttering up the story or distracting the reader or listener. You've got to get rid of the junk, the things that are just wasting space. You can't bring a winter coat in your suitcase to Costa Rica, just like you can't put details that aren't needed in the container of your story. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So those are there's a lot that goes into storytelling. I mean, you could study storytelling for years and not get all the nuances, right? So there's a lot. So I don't want to oversimplify it, but I do want to give your listeners some things to be looking for. And so I'd say the first thing is make sure you've identified the right angle. The second would be to write it out and then write it out again and write it out again. And then the third is to really be a ruthless editor and to kill your darlings and get rid of the stuff that doesn't belong in there and not take that coat to Costa Rica.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think that Costa Rica, that's going to be a great trip. I've never been, but I've heard a lot of great things.
Yeah, it's great. I've been there. I love it. It's good.
It's going to be nice. I think when you're talking about storytelling too, I think, you want to identify, you want to understand your audience. Like you said, a person that is speaking in front of, CEOs that work in the tech industry, they may not be, talking about, speaking with someone else that works in another industry. They're going to make sure that their topic is very specific to their audience. And I think with the details, like you said, you want to be detail oriented, but you don't want to take up a lot of space in the conversation. Try to have something that's going to create a sense of urgency, a call to action, something that a person can really take out of and really make a decision that this is something that I need to move forward on. So I think stories provide all of those opportunities. And as we're coming to a close, it would be great if you can kind of share with everyone how they can connect with you on social media and also learn more about your writing and your public speaking programs that you have with Crazy Good Talks.
Yeah, no, thank you. So yeah, the best place to connect with me on social media is LinkedIn. That's my preferred platform. So if you just put Deirdre Van Nest into LinkedIn, please, I'm an open networker, so please ask me to connect. I would love to connect with you. And then, and then the way that you can learn about what we do and how we help advisors and entrepreneurs is go to crazygoodtalks.com is our website. And we have a couple of different offerings on there. And just say hi. We'd love to say hi to you.
Well, thank you so much, Deirdre, for coming on the show. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really, really great. And I love all the insights that you added to the conversation. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for watching another episode of Insightful Principles, and take care.